October 29th, 539 BCE, Babylon. The great gates of the ancient city stand open. For centuries, Babylon has been the center of power in Mesopotamia. A city of towering walls, temples, and palaces where kings rule through conquest and fear. But tonight, the atmosphere is strangely calm. Soldiers move through the streets without resistance. Civilians watch silently from doorways and rooftops. Instead of the chaos of a sack, the arrival of the conquerors feels almost ceremonial. At the head of this army rides a man whose name will echo through history, Cyrus, known to the world as Cyrus the Great. His troops, drawn from the rising Persian kingdom to the east, move carefully through the city as priests approach carrying offerings and symbols of welcome. Babylon has not been destroyed. It has surrendered. Inside the city, scribes begin carving words onto a clay cylinder that will later become one of the most famous artifacts in world history. The text describes the new ruler's policy toward conquered peoples. Instead of mass slaughter or forced deportation, Cyrus proclaims a different vision of empire. Temples will be restored. Religious practices will be respected. Displaced communities may return to their homelands. Among those affected are the Jewish exiles who had been brought to Babylon decades earlier. Under Cyrus, they are allowed to return to Jerusalem. It is a radical concept for the ancient world, power through tolerance. This moment marks the true beginning of what historians now call the Persian Empire, the first superpower of the ancient world. Within decades, Persian rule will stretch across an astonishing expanse of territory. From the mountains of Central Asia to the Nile River in Egypt, from the deserts of Arabia to the western shores of Anatolia. No empire before it has controlled such a vast and diverse population. But Persian power is not built only on conquest. It is built on organization. Under Cyrus and his successors, the empire becomes a masterpiece of administration. Vast territories are divided into provinces known as satrapies, each governed by appointed officials who report directly to the king. Royal inspectors travel the empire as the king's eyes and ears, ensuring loyalty and suppressing corruption. Roads stretch across thousands of kilometers. The most famous is the royal road connecting the Persian capital to the western frontier. Mounted couriers relay messages across the empire at remarkable speed, allowing royal commands to travel from one side of the empire to the other in days instead of months. It is an early form of imperial infrastructure that later civilizations will attempt to replicate. But the Persian Empire is not just an administrative machine. It is a symbol of imperial ambition and cultural fusion. Its capital cities reflect this scale. Pasargadae, Susa, Persepolis. At Persepolis, the ceremonial capital constructed under King Darius I, massive stone staircases rise toward enormous palace halls supported by towering columns carved with intricate designs. Delegations from across the empire arrive bearing tribute. Egyptians bring gold and linen. Babylonians bring textiles and metalwork. Indians bring exotic animals and precious stones. The empire becomes a crossroads of civilizations. Languages, religions, and traditions mix within its borders. Yet such vast power inevitably produces rivals. To the west lies a cluster of independent city-states along the shores of the Aegean Sea: Athens, Sparta, Corinth. These Greek states are small compared to Persia, but fiercely independent. When Persian authority expands into the region of Anatolia, tensions rise between the empire and these distant Western societies. The conflict that follows will shape the course of ancient history. In 490 BCE, Persian forces cross the Aegean and land near the plain of Marathon. The Greeks manage to repel them. A decade later, the Persians return with an even larger invasion force under King Xerxes. The battles that follow at Thermopylae, Salamis, and Plataea become legendary. For the Greeks, they represent the defense of freedom against empire. For Persia, they are merely distant campaigns on the far edge of a vast domain. Despite these setbacks, the Persian Empire remains one of the most powerful states in the ancient world for centuries. Its influence stretches across continents. Its administrative innovations shape later empires, and its legacy becomes deeply embedded in the identity of the people who inhabit the Iranian plateau. But empires rise and fall. And 2 centuries after Cyrus rides triumphantly into Babylon, another conqueror appears on the horizon. A young Macedonian king, ambitious, brilliant, relentless, Alexander. When his armies march eastward in the 4th century BC, they bring with them a new wave of conquest that will shatter the Persian imperial system and transform the political landscape of the ancient world. Yet even in defeat, the Persian legacy will not disappear. It will adapt. It will endure. And over the next 2,000 years, the civilization that began with Cyrus the Great will survive invasions, dynasties, revolutions, and foreign domination, constantly reinventing itself while preserving a powerful sense of historical identity. An identity that still shapes the modern state of Iran. June 13th, 323 BCE, Babylon. The conqueror who shattered the Persian Empire lies dying inside the palace once used by Persian kings. Alexander of Macedon struggles to breathe. His generals gather around him as the young ruler who defeated Darius III and burned Persepolis fades away at only 32 years old. The empire he carved from Greece to India has no clear successor. Outside the palace walls, the vast territories once ruled by the Persian kings begin to fracture almost immediately. Alexander's generals divide his empire among themselves in a series of violent struggles known as the Wars of the Diadochi. In the lands of the former Persian Empire, power eventually settles in the hands of one of these successors, the Seleucid dynasty. The Seleucid rulers attempt to impose a new political order across the region. Greek language spreads into administration. Hellenistic cities appear across the Iranian plateau. Greek styles of architecture, philosophy, and governance become dominant in urban centers. For a time, it seems as if Persian imperial identity might disappear beneath the weight of this new Hellenistic world. But beneath the surface, something very different is happening. In the countryside, among the Iranian tribes and noble families who once served the Achaemenid kings, cultural memory remains strong. Traditions of Persian kingship survive in local customs and oral histories. Religious practices tied to Zoroastrian belief continue across the plateau. Gradually, resistance to Seleucid authority grows. Then, in the 3rd century BC, a new power emerges from the northeastern frontier. The Parthians, originally a semi-nomadic Iranian people from the region near modern Turkmenistan. The Parthians begin expanding southward under a leader named Arsaces. Their warriors are skilled horse archers who fight with remarkable mobility across the open landscapes of the Iranian plateau. By the mid-2nd century, BCE Parthian forces have captured large portions of the former Persian territories from the Seleucid rulers. A new empire is forming. The Parthian Empire becomes one of the great powers of the ancient world. Its rulers revive elements of Persian imperial tradition while adapting them to a decentralized political structure. Local kings and nobles maintain significant autonomy, but loyalty to the Parthian monarch remains essential for maintaining order across the vast territory. Strategically positioned between east and west, the Parthian Empire becomes a crucial link along the Silk Road trade routes. Caravans carrying silk spices, precious metals, and textiles move through Parthian territory, connecting China, India, and the Mediterranean world. Wealth flows through cities across the Iranian plateau. But the Parthians face a powerful rival to the west, Rome. The Roman Republic and later the Roman Empire expands steadily across the Mediterranean and into the Middle East. Inevitably, the two empires collide along the frontiers of Mesopotamia and Armenia. In 53 BCE, Roman general Marcus Licinius Crassus leads an ambitious campaign against the Parthians. Confident in Roman military superiority, his legions march deep into Mesopotamian territory. They never return. At the Battle of Carrhae, Parthian cavalry devastates the Roman army using coordinated attacks by horse archers and heavily armored cataphract cavalry. Thousands of Roman soldiers are killed. Crassus himself dies during negotiations after the battle. The defeat shocks Rome and confirms Parthia as one of the few states capable of matching Roman military power. For centuries, the Roman-Parthian frontier becomes one of the most contested borders in the ancient world. Yet internal pressures gradually weaken the Parthian state. Its decentralized political structure gives enormous power to regional nobles. Rivalries among aristocratic families often erupt into civil war. By the early 3rd century CE, the empire begins to fragment. Once again, the Iranian plateau becomes the stage for the rise of a new dynasty, this time from the southwestern region of Fars. In 224 CE, a local ruler named Ardashir defeats the last Parthian king in a decisive battle. Ardashir claims descent from the ancient Achaemenid kings and declares the founding of a new Persian empire, the Sassanian Empire. Under the Sassanians, Persian identity experiences a powerful revival. Zoroastrianism becomes the official state religion, and religious institutions gain significant influence in imperial governance. Monumental architecture returns on a grand scale. Royal imagery and inscriptions emphasize the divine authority of the king. The Sassanian state develops a highly organized bureaucracy and military system capable of rivaling the Roman and later Byzantine empires. For more than 4 centuries, the Sassanians dominate the Iranian plateau and much of the surrounding region. Their capital at Ctesiphon becomes one of the great cities of the ancient world. Massive palace halls and vaulted chambers symbolize imperial grandeur. And once again, Persia stands as a central power in global geopolitics. But history rarely allows empires to stand forever. By the early 7th century, the Sassanian Empire enters a period of devastating conflict with its longtime rival, the Byzantine Empire. Decades of war drain resources, destabilize the economy, and weaken the state. At the very moment when the empire is most vulnerable, a new force begins emerging from the Arabian Peninsula, a movement inspired by a new religion, Islam. Within a few decades, Arab armies carrying the banner of this new faith sweep across the Middle East with astonishing speed. The armies of the Sassanian kings, once among the most powerful in the world, face an enemy unlike any they have encountered before. The battles that follow will not only end the Sassanian Empire, they will permanently transform the religious, cultural, and political landscape of Persia. November 636. CE, the plains near Al-Qadisiyah, Mesopotamia. Dust rises across the battlefield as 2 armies face each other under the burning sun. On one side stand the forces of the Sassanian Empire, armored cavalry elite warriors who represent centuries of imperial military tradition. Behind them lies the ancient civilization of Persia, an empire that has dominated the Iranian plateau and much of the Middle East for more than 400 years. Opposing them is a very different army. Arab tribal fighters united under the banner of Islam. Only a few years earlier, these warriors had been divided by tribal rivalries across the Arabian Peninsula. But the rise of Islam under the Prophet Muhammad has transformed them into a rapidly expanding political and religious movement. Now they are pushing northward. The Battle of Al-Qadisiyah becomes one of the decisive confrontations in Middle Eastern history. Over several days of brutal fighting, the Sassanian army attempts to hold the line. War elephants charge across the field. Persian cavalry units counterattack again and again. But the empire is already weakened. Years of exhausting war with the Byzantine Empire have drained resources and destabilized leadership. Internal divisions and political intrigue have fractured the once powerful state. Eventually, the Persian defensive line collapses. Arab forces break through. The road to the Sassanian capital lies open. Within a few years, the ancient imperial structure that began centuries earlier with Cyrus the Great disappears. The last Sassanian ruler, Yazdegerd III, flees eastward across the empire, attempting to gather support for resistance. But it is too late. By the mid-7th century, the Iranian plateau has been absorbed into the rapidly expanding Islamic Caliphate. For many civilizations, such a conquest might erase earlier identity. But Persia proves remarkably resilient. At first, Arab governors administer the newly conquered territories, and Arabic becomes the dominant language of administration and religious scholarship. Islam spreads gradually across the region, replacing the state-sponsored Zoroastrian institutions of the Sassanian era. Yet Persian culture does not vanish. Instead, it adapts. Over the following centuries, Persian scholars, poets, administrators, and intellectuals begin playing a central role within the broader Islamic world. The Persian language itself evolves into what is now known as New Persian, written using the Arabic script, but retaining deep connections to earlier Iranian linguistic traditions. By the 9th and 10th centuries, Persian cultural influence is expanding once again. One of the most powerful examples of this cultural revival appears in literature. Around the year 10, a Persian poet named Ferdowsi completes an epic work known as the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. This monumental poem recounts the mythological and historical past of Iran, stretching from legendary ancient rulers to the fall of the Sassanian Empire. Through vivid storytelling, Ferdowsi preserves the memory of Persia's ancient kings and heroes. The Shahnameh becomes more than literature. It becomes a cultural foundation. Generations of Iranians grow up hearing stories of Rostam Zal and other legendary figures who symbolize bravery, justice, and national pride. Through poetry and storytelling, the memory of ancient Persia survives inside the Islamic world. Meanwhile, Persian dynasties begin re-emerging across the Iranian plateau. Local rulers gradually gain autonomy from the central caliphates in Baghdad. Dynasties such as the Samanids, Buyids, and later the Seljuks rule significant territories while promoting Persian culture and administration. Cities across the region flourish as centers of scholarship and trade. Persian scientists and philosophers contribute to mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and political theory. Figures such as Avicenna write influential works that will shape intellectual life not only in the Islamic world but later in medieval Europe. Persian architecture evolves as well. Mosques, gardens, and palaces across cities like Isfahan and Shiraz incorporate intricate tilework, geometric patterns, and monumental domes. These designs blend Islamic religious traditions with older Persian artistic influences. Yet this era of cultural flowering also faces waves of invasion. In the 13th century, the Mongols arrive. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan and later his successors, Mongol armies sweep across Central Asia and into Persia with devastating force. Cities are destroyed. Entire populations are displaced. For a moment, it appears that Persian civilization may be extinguished entirely. But even the Mongols eventually become part of the Persian world. Many Mongol rulers adopt Persian administrative practices and convert to Islam. Over time, they integrate into the cultural fabric of the region they once conquered. Once again, Persia absorbs the shock of invasion and rebuilds. And from this long process of adaptation and survival, a new political and religious transformation begins to take shape. A transformation that will define Iran's identity for centuries. The rise of the Safavid dynasty. A movement that will turn Persia into the center of Shia Islam and create the foundations of the modern Iranian state. July 1501. Tabriz, northwestern Persia. A teenage warrior rides through the gates of the city, surrounded by armed followers dressed in distinctive red headgear. He is only 14 years old, but in this moment he declares himself Shah. His name is Ismail, and with that proclamation the Safavid dynasty is born. The scene is charged with symbolism. After centuries of shifting dynasties and foreign domination, Persia once again has a ruler claiming the ancient title of Shahanshah, King of Kings. Yet Ismail's rise is not just a political revolution. It is also a religious one. Standing before his followers in Tabriz, Ismail makes a decision that will permanently reshape Iranian identity. He declares Twelver Shi'ism the official religion of the state. At the time, most of the Muslim world is Sunni. The Ottoman Empire to the west follows Sunni Islam. So do the major centers of Islamic learning across the Middle East. But Ismail and his Safavid movement promote a different interpretation of Islam, centered on the lineage of Ali, the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad, and the belief in a line of 12 divinely guided imams. The decision instantly transforms the political and religious landscape of Persia. Religious scholars are brought into the country from Shia communities across the region, particularly from areas that are now Iraq and Lebanon. They begin building institutions that will spread Shia theology across the population. Over time, mosques, seminaries, and religious networks reshape the spiritual life of the Iranian plateau. Conversion is not immediate or effortless. Many communities have practiced Sunni Islam for generations. But through state sponsorship, religious education, and political enforcement, the Safavid rulers gradually create a distinctly Shia society. The transformation is one of the most significant turning points in Iranian history. For the first time, Persia develops a clear religious identity that distinguishes it from many of its neighbors. And that distinction quickly becomes geopolitical. To the west, the Ottoman Empire views the rise of a Shia Persian state as both a political and religious threat. Tensions escalate rapidly. In 1514, Ottoman Sultan Selim I leads a massive army eastward. The two empires collide at the Battle of Chaldiran. Ottoman artillery and firearms give them a technological advantage that Safavid forces struggle to counter. The Safavids suffer a devastating defeat, and Ottoman troops briefly capture Tabriz. But the Safavid state survives. In the decades that follow, the Safavid rulers reorganize their military and administrative systems, strengthening their control over the Iranian plateau. Then, in the late 16th century, one of the most important Safavid rulers comes to power, Shah Abbas I. Under Shah Abbas, the Safavid Empire reaches its greatest strength. He reforms the military by creating a standing army loyal directly to the crown. He reduces the power of rival tribal leaders and strengthens central authority. And he transforms the city of Isfahan into one of the most magnificent capitals in the world. Wide boulevards, grand mosques, and vast public squares turn Isfahan into a center of art, commerce, and architecture. Merchants from Europe, India, and Central Asia arrive to trade silk carpets, ceramics, and precious metals. European travelers who visit the city describe it with amazement. Isfahan is half the world. Yet beneath the splendor, the Safavid Empire faces constant pressure from powerful neighbors. The Ottomans remained a formidable rival to the West. In the east, Central Asian forces challenge Persian control over frontier territories. Trade routes shift as European maritime powers begin dominating global commerce. By the early 18th century, internal corruption and external pressures weaken the Safavid state. In 1722, Afghan tribal forces capture Isfahan. The once powerful Safavid dynasty collapses. But Persia does not vanish. Once again, new leaders rise from the chaos. Military commanders and regional rulers compete for power across the fractured landscape. Eventually, a fierce warrior named Nader Shah emerges as the dominant figure. Through relentless campaigns, Nader Shah reunifies much of the Iranian territory and briefly restores imperial power. His armies even marched deep into India, capturing the Mughal capital of Delhi in 1739 and carrying away immense wealth. Yet his empire proves short-lived. After his assassination in 1747, Persia fragments again into competing factions. Still, the deeper transformation that began under the Safavids remains intact. The Iranian plateau has become firmly identified with Shia Islam. This religious identity will shape the country's politics, alliances, and conflicts for centuries to come. And as the world enters the modern era, Persia will soon confront a new kind of challenge. Not invading armies from neighboring empires, but the growing influence of European powers. May 1st, 1908. Masjid Soliman, southwestern Persia. Deep beneath the rocky hills of Khuzestan, drilling crews strike something that will change the destiny of Persia forever. Oil. At first, it erupts violently from the earth. Dark crude spraying high into the air as engineers scramble to contain the pressure. Workers stare in disbelief as the black liquid pours across the drilling site. But thousands of kilometers away in London, another group of men immediately understands the true meaning of this moment. Oil is not just biofuel, it is power. Within a few years, British investors formed the Anglo-Persian Oil Company to exploit the massive reserves discovered in southern Persia. Pipelines, refineries, and export terminals begin appearing across the region. Tankers carry Persian oil toward Europe, but the profits flow overwhelmingly outward. Persia itself receives only a fraction of the revenue generated from its own natural resources. For many Iranians, this becomes a symbol of national humiliation. And it is not the first time foreign powers have shaped the country's fate. During the 19th century, Persia had already become trapped in the geopolitical rivalry between two expanding empires. To the north, the Russian Empire pushes steadily southward through the Caucasus and Central Asia. To the south, the British Empire seeks to protect its strategic routes to India. Caught between these powers, the Persian Qajar dynasty struggles to maintain sovereignty. Foreign concessions are granted in exchange for financial support. Infrastructure projects and resource rights often fall under foreign control. The result is growing resentment among intellectuals, merchants, and religious leaders. By the early 20th century, that frustration erupts into political action. In 1906, mass protests sweep across Tehran and other cities. Demonstrators demand limits on royal authority and the creation of a national parliament. The constitutional revolution begins. For the first time in Persian history, a modern political movement emerges demanding representative government and legal reform. The Shah reluctantly agrees to establish a parliament known as the Majlis. It is a dramatic shift, but the young constitutional system faces constant pressure. Internal political divisions weaken the reform movement. Meanwhile, Russia and Britain continue intervening in Persian affairs to protect their own interests. Then global conflict arrives. During World War I, foreign armies moved through Persian territory, despite the country's official neutrality. The fragile political system struggles to maintain stability. Out of this turbulent environment, a new figure rises within the Persian military, Reza Khan. In 1921, Reza Khan leads a military coup that gradually consolidates power. Within a few years, he crowns himself Reza Shah Pahlavi, founding a new dynasty. Reza Shah envisions transforming Persia into a strong, modern nation-state. Railroads are constructed across the country. New schools and universities open. Infrastructure projects expand transportation and industry. The state attempts to centralize authority and reduce the influence of tribal leaders. And in 1935, Reza Shah announces a symbolic change. Persia will now officially be known internationally as Iran. The name reflects the ancient heritage of the Iranian people and their connection to the long arc of history stretching back to the earliest Persian civilizations. Yet modernization under the Pahlavi dynasty comes with strict political control. Opposition is suppressed. Press freedoms are limited. The monarchy concentrates power in the hands of the state. Then the Second World War once again draws Iran into global geopolitics. In 1941, British and Soviet forces invade the country, fearing that Reza Shah may sympathize with Nazi Germany and threaten Allied supply routes. Under pressure, the Shah abdicates. His son takes the throne, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The young monarch inherits a nation caught between competing global forces during the early Cold War. And soon Iran's vast oil reserves will once again become the center of international conflict. In 1951, a nationalist politician named Mohammad Mossadegh rises to power and makes a bold decision. He nationalizes the Iranian oil industry. For many Iranians, it is a moment of long-awaited economic independence. But for Britain, whose companies had controlled the oil infrastructure for decades, the decision is unacceptable. Tensions escalate rapidly. Diplomatic pressure mounts. And behind-the-scenes intelligence agencies in London and Washington begin planning an operation that will once again reshape the political future of Iran. August 19, 1953. Tehran, Iran. Crowds surge through the streets. Some carry portraits of the young Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Others shout slogans against the Prime Minister. Trucks filled with men push through the avenues as chaos spreads across the capital. Gunfire erupts near government buildings. Smoke rises above the city. Behind the scenes, one of the most consequential covert operations of the Cold War is unfolding. For months, the United States Central Intelligence Agency and the British Intelligence Service, MI6, have been working together to remove Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh from power. His decision to nationalize the Iranian oil industry has threatened Western economic and strategic interests in the region. Operation Ajax moves into its final stage. Through a combination of propaganda, political pressure, bribery of key figures, and organized street demonstrations, the plan succeeds. Mossadegh is arrested. The monarchy is restored with full authority under Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. For the Shah, the coup becomes the beginning of a new era of centralized power. With strong backing from the United States and other Western allies, his government begins an ambitious program of modernization known as the White Revolution during the 1960s. Land reforms attempt to redistribute property. Infrastructure expands rapidly. Literacy campaigns and educational programs spread across the country. Cities grow quickly. Tehran becomes a booming metropolis filled with construction projects, new highways, universities, and expanding industries. Oil revenue pours into the national economy. On the surface, Iran appears to be transforming into a modern regional power aligned closely with the West. But beneath the modernization, deep tensions are building. Rapid economic changes disrupt traditional social structures. Rural populations migrate into crowded urban areas. Many religious leaders view the Shah's reforms as an attack on Islamic traditions. Political dissent is suppressed by the powerful intelligence and security service known as SAVAK. Criticism grows in mosques, universities, and underground political networks. Among the most vocal critics is a religious scholar living in exile, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. From exile. First in Iraq and later in France, Khomeini delivers speeches and recorded messages condemning the monarchy, Western influence, and what he describes as moral corruption within Iranian society. His words circulate secretly inside Iran, spreading through religious networks and student groups. By the late 1970s, economic strain, political repression, and widespread dissatisfaction begin fueling mass demonstrations. January 1979. Protests erupt across Iranian cities. Millions of people pour into the streets demanding the end of the monarchy. Workers strike. Government authority begins to collapse. The Shah leaves the country. Then, on February 1st, 1979, a plane lands at Mehrabad Airport in Tehran. Ayatollah Khomeini returns to Iran after 15 years in exile. Crowds numbering in the millions fill the streets to greet him. Within weeks, the monarchy falls. In its place, a new political system emerges, the Islamic Republic of Iran. The new government blends republican institutions with religious authority. A constitution establishes elected bodies such as the presidency and parliament, but ultimate authority rests with the supreme leader, a religious figure tasked with safeguarding the principles of the Islamic Revolution. Iran's identity has transformed again. The country that once hosted ancient Persian kings, Zoroastrian priests, Islamic caliphate administrators, and modernizing monarchs now becomes the center of a revolutionary Shia Islamic state. Almost immediately, the new republic faces enormous challenges. In 1980, neighboring Iraq under Saddam Hussein launches a massive invasion, hoping to exploit the turmoil of the revolution. The Iran-Iraq war that follows lasts 8 brutal years and becomes one of the longest conventional wars of the 20th century. Hundreds of thousands are killed, cities are bombed, economies are devastated. Yet the conflict also strengthens the revolutionary government, reinforcing national unity against an external enemy. By the late 20th and early 21st centuries, Iran emerges as a complex regional power. Its government balances religious ideology with state institutions. Its population includes a young and highly educated generation, navigating the tensions between tradition and globalization. Its foreign policy reflects centuries of historical experience, memories of empire, memories of foreign intervention, memories of revolution. From the ancient conquests of Cyrus the Great to the political upheavals of the modern Middle East, Iran's story stretches across more than 2,000 years of history. Empires have risen and fallen on its soil. Religions have transformed its identity. Foreign powers have tried to shape its destiny. Yet through all these upheavals, one reality remains constant. Iran endures, a civilization whose roots reach deep into the ancient world, still shaping geopolitics in the present day. End